This podcast is presented by the Education and Development Department of the United Supreme Council, Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite, Prince Hall affiliated, Northern Jurisdiction, USA Incorporated. My name is Sovereign Grand Inspector General Dr. Dwayne Thomas, and I serve as the Director of the Education and Development Department. The Moving Camp podcast is designed to educate, to inform, and to provide information across our audience, as well as discuss important issues as they affect our membership. And that is exactly what we plan to do on this episode. So without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce the host of the Moving Camp podcast, Sublime Prince Stephen Barrett. Sublime Prince Barrett is the Commander-in-Chief of Peninsular Consistory number 44, Valley of Lansing, Orient of Michigan. He is also a valuable member of the United Supreme Council Education and Development Department. Sublime Prince Barrett, the floor is yours, sir.
All right, thank you so much there, Sovereign Grand Inspector General Thomas. As he stated before, again, my name is Stephen Barrett. I'm here to be your humble and gracious host. And what we do is we have something pretty exciting for you all today. So what's going to end up happening is we're going to go through why we're called the Moving Camp podcast, right? So to go through that, we have to understand the camp. So today's episode, episode number 2, is going to be about the camp. And I'm here to talk about something really simple, is why it's called the Moving Camp is because we are tasked to combat 5 plagues, which is ignorance, superstition, fanaticism, despotism, and ambition, which inhibits us from regenerating humanity. So we have to go through a process of changing the way that we go about educating and teaching our individuals within our in our Orients and throughout the world. So what I enlisted today, a wise man told me that you do not know the answer to every question, just where to get the answer. So essentially you should know everything. So I tapped on the shoulder 2 individuals who know everything. So I feel like I know everything. And I'm getting ready to introduce them here. That's going to be our presenters for this. So what we're first going to have up here, and I'll introduce both, then I'll have them start presenting, is one, I have an author, an educator, humble servant for the craft, Sovereign Grand Inspector General Stuart Lee out of Keystone Consistory number 85 out of Orient of the Far East. Then I have Sublime Prince Dr. Hernando Flowers. He is the first lieutenant out of Peninsular Consistory number 44 out the Valley of Lansing out of the Orient of Michigan. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to step to the side and I'm going to allow Sovereign Grand Inspector General Lee come and talk to us a little bit about the history and some of the evolution of the camp. So Sovereign Grand Inspector General Lee, the floor is yours, sir.
Roger that. Sublime Prince Barrett, thank you for allowing me to come on and do this presentation. I'm always one to say that information should not be hoarded, but if you can share some information to people, go ahead and do it. Share as much information as you can. It's meant to be shared and for us to grow from it. So I'm here today to talk about the Scottish Rite camp, specifically certain variations of the camp. What kind of inspired me to look at this is as I was trying to learn more about the Scottish Rite, and mainly, especially with the camp. I mean, the camp is one of the most distinguishable symbols outside of the double-headed eagle for the Scottish Rite. So I just wanted to learn more about it, and as I learned more about it and started to research more, I started to identify that there are different variations of the camp out there. Not all of them are the same. It's important to kind of learn those variations because you look at the evolution of the camp, where it started and then how it is today. And I think that's very important. During this presentation, we'll talk about the Scottish Rite camp, certain versions. We have the 1783 Franken manuscript version, the 25-degree system, French illustration of the camp, the Book of the Scottish Rite 4th through the 32nd degree Prince Hall affiliation, as well as a Bridge to Light. You can see here, these are the camps that we're going to talk about, and they're all here in order just so you can get a quick overlook of them. This one here is for the 1783 Franken manuscript. And of course, we have the 25 degree system for the French illustration, the Book of the Scottish Rite, as well as a Bridge to Light. The 1783 Franken manuscript camp was actually really the first camp. It consists of 25 degrees. Those 25 degrees were brought by Stephen Morin, who has received a patent out of France to go to the New World and basically present Scottish Rite Masonry, or at that time, the Order of the Royal Secret. And so it had the different shapes on it, where we see the nonagon, which is the outer rim. We could see the heptagon that's there. We have the pentagon going further in. Then we have our triangle, equilateral triangle, and then we have our circle. And all of the camps will be basically in that fashion, but there will be some things that are different, especially as we go through. We'll see that the letters on the camp, that we have the S-A-L-I-X, Salix, Noni, it'll go in the opposite direction. Right now, it's going counterclockwise. Okay, so counterclockwise. When we go to the 25 degree French system, it's relatively the same. We still have the same shapes that are there, except now it's a little more animated. Whereas you can see where you have your banners, where you have the Ark and the Covenant with the palm trees, you have the lion, the couching lion with the key in its mouth. Here you have the flaming heart winged with the laurel above it. Here you have the double-headed eagle with the imperial crown clutching the sword and bloody heart. And then we have this banner here is with the ox. Now, this camp is actually out of our book. It's the book of the Scottish Rite 4th through 32nd degree Prince Hall affiliation. Now, this camp more closely resembles the variation of the camp from the 25 degree system from the French illustration, and also through the Franken manuscript somewhat. As we look at this camp, and I want you to pay particular attention, we have the letters that Salix, Noni, Tengu. Once again, we're looking at everything going counterclockwise, where we have our S, A, L, I, X, and then we have our N, O, N, and then we get to our I. When we go to the Pentagon, we can see our T, E to represent on each banner, N, G, and U. Once again, remember it's going counterclockwise. And then we have our delta that's in the middle. But there's one thing that you'll notice that's going to be different. You notice in the circle, you actually have the circle and you have 5 arms. And that's going to be different than the Bridge to Light camp. So on this one, the 5 arms are supposed to be 5 commanders that establish their banners, being the banners on the Pentagon. And this is when we do just a side-by-side version or side-by-side comparison of the two. So once again, the nonagon is still there, the heptagon, the pentagon, as well as the equilateral triangle and the circle. The banners are relatively the same in the same place. The camps are in the same place. Here we can see the actual emblems that are on the flags, whereas the Franken manuscript, you cannot. Now, previously I mentioned that the Book of the Scottish Rite, 4th through 32nd degree camp, is more similar to the 25 degree system French illustration. And if you take a look at it, you can see the similarities where you have the S, once again, Salix, Noni. Everything's going counterclockwise. Now, there is a difference here. One of the major differences is when we look at the French illustration, the T is assigned to the couching lion with the key in its mouth, whereas the T in the Book of the Scottish Rite shows that it's assigned to the Ark and the Covenant with the palm trees. When we go to the flaming heart, winged flaming heart with the laurel, you can see that's E. But when we go to the Scottish Rite, Book of the Scottish Rite, Prince Hall Affiliation, you can see that the E is actually assigned to the couching lion with the key in its mouth. Now, looking at this, I think it was done when it was probably transcribed from the Book of the Scottish Rite was transcribed possibly from the 25-degree system. Just the letters may not have been moved over a little bit closer to the banner, and that may have caused the error. But as we look at the previous camps, they all show the T being assigned to the couching lion. Another thing with the 25-degree system from the French illustration, the camps are in the same location on the nonagon. Okay, they're in the same location. Regarding the resemblance, there may be a reason why. The first Scottish Rite organization among Blacks appeared in Philadelphia in 1820 under the title African Grand Council. Now, it was probable, according to our history book, that it consisted of only 25 degrees at that time. Now, African Grand Council was eventually, by our history books, merged in with King David Supreme Council of Philadelphia. The African Grand Council never presented itself as a 33-degree system of Scottish Rite Masonry, but we think according to history books, it was 25 degrees, and that could be for reasons. Stephen Morin and his deputies, they were out of the West Indies, and there was a influx of West Indians going to Philadelphia at the time. So that could be a reason of why it closely resembles that. Now, here's the variation of the bridge to light. This is the one that we see more often. Now, notice when we say Salix Noni, it's going in the opposite direction. You have the S here, you have A, L, I, X, and then N, O, N, and I. Now, sometimes you'll see IS, and that's to another illusion of why it's for IS, but it refers to a sacred treasure, which is basically truth, and that's through a phrase that we can discuss later. Once again, you still have the heptagon, and you have the pentagon, but notice the location of the letters. We have the letter T, which is now down in the pentagon, but it's at the staff of the T, and it's going to the couching lion with the key in its mouth. The letter E going to the flaming heart with the laurel around it. And then you have the N with the double-headed eagle with the imperial crowns clutching a bloody heart and the sword. And then we get to G, where that's the ox, and 9, the Ark of the Covenant with the palm trees. When we go to the center, we actually have the delta, but we notice here we have a raven, we have a dove, and then we have the rising phoenix. So with the raven, that's supposed to represent sort of the negative, dark, and then with the dove, white. So it's a balance between somewhat good and evil, but when we have that balance together, we have the phoenix rising. And you'll notice in the circle, you have the St. Andrew's cross. In the middle of the St. Andrew's cross would be the sovereign of sovereigns, the sovereign grand commander. And these on the four extremities of the cross, that would actually be 4 marshals for the four marshals for the Sovereign Grand Commander. So there are some distinct differences between both camps, but with the letters, the camps are still assigned to these specific letters as you go around it. And we've discussed that. So this is just a brief presentation on the variations of the Scottish Rite camp. Once again, we talked about our 1783 Franken manuscript camp version, and then we had talked about our 25-degree system of the French illustration. Then we went to the book of the Scottish Rite, 4th through 32nd degree Prince Hall affiliation, as well as a bridge to light. Just kind of as a remotivation of why this is important. Once again, it's to kind of gain an understanding of where it started and how it evolved now. And Scottish Rite Masonry, as well as Masonry in general, it's somewhat of an enigma. It's a sphinx. You know, it's something that we're constantly learning. And as we go along, we're just going to pick up new things. Just as doctors practice law, doctors practice medicine, lawyers practice law. As Masons, we practice Masonry. And if there are any questions, I'm ready to receive them.
Yes, sir. Sovereign Grand Inspector General Stuart Lee. Thank you so much. I actually learned a couple things, and we'll swing back around to it in a little bit at the end for the last discussion. But I want something for the audience to be able to notate. From what you're saying, you spoke on why it was important for us to practice this and understand this. But now it dives into something that you said that's kind of piqued my interest. You spoke about the history of like who was given the Scottish Rite. You were talking about the individuals. I think you said that ended up migrating to Philadelphia and things of that nature. That historical piece that you just shared with us, why do you feel that that's important for us to learn while we're studying these things, such as the camp and our rituals, like what was going on at that time? Like, why is that important to study as well as studying like our ritual and things of that nature?
Well, I think it's important for the fact that it's really learning from once we came. One thing about the camp that I've found is that as you go through it, especially if you just look at the Bridge to Light version, you can go through the Bridge to Light, and the Bridge to Light's very detailed with the camp. However, sometimes you find that there's not a lot of information there to really grab onto as to the why. You know, why is it this way? And so when you go back to the 25-degree system, which is the beginning, you start to see some differences. You start to see some similarities. And I think that's important because once you get that foundation, I think it helps you grow into the Scottish Rite and to learn the camp more. But I'm always one also to say that you have right, wrong, and different. Okay, just because something is different doesn't make it wrong. I know at times when I came up as a young Scottish Rite Mason, I would be told, "No, Brother Lee, that's not what we do. That's not what we do." And somewhat like a conversation we talked about earlier when we talk about the Prince Hall authors that are present. A lot of the books that are written about Scottish Rite are not by Prince Hall authors. So we have to go to those books to get more information.
I love it. I love it. And I'm going to save my last question here for our discussion at the end after Sublime Prince Flowers' presentation. Because again, I think we're moving in the right direction. Because like I said, I learned some new information here this evening too, that now I got to go back, research, look at some stuff, figure it out. But no, I appreciate it so much. And so now what we'll do is I'll have Sublime Prince Dr. Hernando Flowers. I'll have him come up and bring up his presentation here. He's going to yell at me for using this whole title, but it's okay. Too late, sir. Everybody in the world's seeing it already, and they're going to call you Dr. Flowers now. So I will give this up again. This is Sublime Prince, Dr. Hernando Flowers. He's going to go over the shapes that we find within the camp. And sir, the floor is yours.
Outstanding. First and foremost, giving giving homage and praise to the Grand Architect of the Universe for allowing me this opportunity to be before you. Special thanks to SGIG, Thomas and Lee for this opportunity as well. And Sands, I'm going to get you later. As mentioned, I am Sublime Prince Hernando Flowers out of the Valley of Lansing, Orient of Michigan, Peninsula Sensory number 44. And my portion is going to cover the shapes of the camp. Through this presentation, hopefully, you'll learn a little bit more about the significance of these seemingly simple geometric figures. Now, as we're all aware, the camp is comprised of multiple shapes, as was spoken about previously. You know, we have the nonagon, which has 9 angles, 9 sides. We have the heptagon, 7 angles, 7 sides. The pentagon, 5. Triangle, 3. And then depending on your mathematical reference, we have the circle in the middle, which a lot of sources say 1. Now, 3, 5, 7, 9. All these are important numbers within Masonry. And one thing to note is that if you include the circle in the middle, which, as mentioned, has 1 side and 1 angle, depending on the source, you will get the number 25, which may allude to the Order of the World Secret, as SGIG Lee mentioned in his presentation. So there's a lot of significance within these shapes and within these sides. Now let's start off with the nonagon. The nonagon has located at each of its angles a pennon. For those that aren't aware, a pennon is typically forked, swallow-tailed ends. And this style of pennon originated with the flag of the Knight Bachelor. The pennon is also used in special ceremonies, so like your funerals, your ceremonies. The fork-tail shaped pennon is commonly used in the military. Shout out to all my veterans out there. As the unit guidon, and each pennon on the nonagon represents a degree in Masonry from the 1st through the 18th. So let's cover these real quick. So each pennon has a different color. We start off with the chapter Rose Croix, with the white speckled lightly with crimson, 18th and 17th. Then we go to the Council of Princes of Jerusalem, which is light green, 16 and 15. Let's move on to the Lodge of Perfection. We got your 14th degree represented by red. We got your 13th and 12th represented by red and black, or black and red rather. Your 9th through 11th degree is represented by a black pennon. Then we got red and black in diamonds for 8, red and green for 6 and 7, green for 5 and 4, and for craft masonry, you guessed it, blue for the first 3 degrees. And one thing to note is that in various religious sects, you'll note that 9 is considered a symbol of spiritual enlightenment. Completion is also regarded as a full, flawless, heavenly number. Think 3 by 3. You'll also notice that we've covered the first 18 degrees in this shape, but let's put a pin in that thought for just a quick moment. Now on to the heptagon. Now, the heptagon, there's no tenths or degrees associated with the heptagon. However, the number 7 is considered the number of perfection and completion. There are 7 colors in the rainbow, 7 notes in a musical scale, 7 days in a week. There are 7 liberal arts and sciences. We got the trivium, which allows one to vocalize, present, teach, and debate. And then we got the quadrivium, which deals with numbers, space, and time. So again, continuing that trend of symbolism within these shapes. Now, onto the Pentagon. And as mentioned, the Pentagon has 5 sides and 5 angles. The first angle represents the symbolic lodge, the EA degree, the physical man, the fellowcraft degree, the intellectual man, and the master mason, the triune man. The second angle represents the lodge of perfection. So the labor of good of humanity brings us closer to God. So that's service. The third angle represents the Council of Princes of Jerusalem. So the power and devotion to truth. The fourth angle is the chapter of Rose Croix. Men learn to love one another, and the new law of peace on earth, goodwill to man. And in the fifth angle represents the Knights of Kadash, where all men are sons of God, and the light of masonry should illuminate the darkness of the world. Along with this, each external angle displays a standard designated by a letter. And we're not going to go too deep into this, but just a quick point of clarification, a standard is a military or ceremonial flag carried on a pole or a hoist on a rope. So instead of your guidon, think your unit flags, your general's flags, bigger flags. Now, the fifth standard encamped the Grand Pontiffs, or the Masons of the 19th, as well as the Masons of the 20th degree, and the standard bearer is Amariah. Amariah means promised by God, and it's commonly used as a name for priests. Now, when we move to the fourth standard, that encamped the Masons of the 21st and 22nd degree, and the standard bearer was Garamont. Garamont, for those that aren't aware, was the Patriarch of Jerusalem. And according to some sources, he, along with 81 Masons, established Masonry in Europe and established the Order of the Temple. The third standard encamped the Masons of the 23rd and 24th, as well as the 25th degree. The standard bearer is Mashim. The second standard encamped the Masons of the 26th through the 28th degree, and it's Ahula Laib, excuse me for the enunciation. But the name means the tent of the Father. He was an artist appointed to the work of preparing the materials for the tabernacle, according to the book of Exodus. And in the first standard encompassed the Masons of the 29th and 30th degree, and the standard bearer is Bezaleel, which means in God's shadow or protection. He was the chief artisan of the tabernacle and was in charge of building the Ark of the Covenant. Again, book of Exodus. Now, this shape should seem familiar to a lot of us. The triangle. Simple, straight to the point, but this shape represents the triple essence of deity, the Holy Trinity, the triad. But if we were to have a quick paradigm shift and think about, Scottish Rite Masonry, it's deemed as a great light because it reminds us of the grand architect of the universe. It reminds us continuously that there's only one true God, and its 3 sides or angles, that he is our creator, preserver, benefactor, and of his 3 attributes of wisdom, strength, and beauty. Also, let's think about these primitive instruments used by him to produce order out of chaos: fire, light, spirit, and finally, those lovely Masonic attributes of faith, hope, and charity. The last shape that I'll cover, the circle. Now, not meaning to insult anybody's intelligence, but a circle is a round plane whose figure and the boundary consists of points equidistant from a fixed point within the center. Freemasons have adopted this and its interpretation of a circle with a fixed point in the middle, with the point in the center representing the individual man or mason, and the circle represents the line between our passions, vices, prejudices, and those around us. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. I now open the floor to questions.
Well, I got a question, and since I know you pretty well, we're just gonna talk like it's just us here. My question to you, Sublime Prince Flowers, is for these shapes, as you was going through this process, what did you feel, or why did you feel it was important or valuable for us to have a conceptual understanding of the shapes for the whole camp layout, basically? Like, why is it relevant?
So it ties into that concept of symbolism and allegory. Everything that happens within Masonry has a meaning, whether we know it or not. So it was interesting to me, personal story, going into my meetings and seeing this picture on the ground. Now, I get the concept militarily, right? Because it makes sense. We got your guidons, your company level. We got your standards, your battalion level. So your lower echelons on the outside, protecting the higher echelons on the inside. Makes perfect sense. But where's the deeper meaning? Why do we have these specific shapes with these specific numbers? What was the meaning of the specific names? Like, who are these people? So it was just a point of enlightenment for me, just to further understand the why. Because then things start to make sense, things start to connect together, and it's not just us going through the motions.
Interesting, because now I connected a dot here. And Cyber Guard Inspector General Lee, I'm getting ready to call on you here in a second. Get you ready. And so give me 2 seconds. Let's do this here. And what we'll walk through is now there's a dialogue that I want to be able to have with you two really quickly, because you both said something that kind of resonated with me. Both of you spoke on the history of something that involved within the camp. And I never really thought about it. I'm always thinking about like maybe the esoteric meaning, or like what the philosophical meaning of something in masonry. But both of you spoke on history. Can you elaborate on why, especially as Prince Hall Masons, why is history important to include in the teachings of what we do in the Scottish Rite? Anyone can go first.
Yeah, I got this one. History is important because we don't want to repeat it. I'll give you an example, somewhat. I'll give you an example. When we look at the formation of the United Supreme Council, at one point in time, we had 5 United Supreme Councils, 3 in the north and 2 in the south. The 3 formed the northern jurisdiction. The 2 in the south formed the southern jurisdiction. At that time, there were a lot of things going on, such as you had the national compacts, so national Grand Lodges, states' rights. You had people in different organizations, but there was confusion. And so Peter Ray was kind of the one who spearheaded the initiative, basically to meet, and all these 5 Supreme Councils meet and basically create the Supreme Council. It resulted in the northern jurisdiction, southern jurisdiction. But once again, remember what was going on. You had 5 Supreme Councils encroaching on different territories, trying to figure out who's who. So when we look at that history and we understand the why it came together, and when you see history repeat itself, you understand. And it's, history repeats itself sometimes, and it's just something, if you don't learn from it or you look back from it and you understand the why and why it's so important. And I'll leave it at that.
We'll have another conversation. We have to have a conversation offline. We'll have a spirited dialogue. I enjoyed it. Flowers, is there anything you'd like to add on to that one, sir?
No, it was properly expounded upon. I think just as he mentioned, we want to make sure we understand the why, so that way, if there's things that were changed for a specific reason, that we don't repeat that specific reason, and we continuously improve from there. So I'm in full agreement.
One thing, and this is kind of ironic, and I want to make sure to give a shout out to Sublime Prince Kelly Coleman at Saginaw Valley, number 71. We ended up doing a presentation for the camp for our council deliberation for Michigan, right? So we have this where we come in, Sublime Princes, and we present new information. And as we were studying the camp, literally 2 days before my presentation, I realized that what I studied was not the camp that's out of our book, because I did not study history. So I'm coming out there, and hopefully people can see and understand, like, hey, as we become more transparent in our teachings and our education, we can learn from one another. And then also, that's why I was saying history, because now that process that I went on, I found out, like, oh, we don't have that in the from this circle of infinity. We don't have that coming out of there, right? It's something different. But then when I looked, I traced, like you said, Sovereign Grand Inspector General Lee, our ritual resembles something else a little bit closer than others. And then there was a sense of pride that came with it, right? There's a whole different ball game because we included history. So hopefully for those individuals who are watching this, you learned a plethora of information, but also now you start to pique your curiosity, like, hey, what's that? What's this? And keep just asking why, right? The last question before we head out of here that I just want to get your opinion on, right, would be, and this is for both of you, if I am a Sublime Prince, Grand Inspector General, Sovereign Grand Inspector General, and I want to research more, I want to dive into this a little bit more, what are some of the tools or resources, or where should I go to kind of get more information on what you presented on, or anything within the camp or that title or that sphere? So if you want to go ahead and expound upon that for individuals to have a little bit of homework.
SGIG, if you don't mind, I'll kick this one off. So for this one, I usually tell people to start off with the source document. Start off in your ritual, your syllabus, whatever the case may be. Start off there, because then it'll at least give you a baseline. From there, you utilize the Bible, because there's a lot of biblical references, or any other religious text, because it ties in. I also recommend a dictionary, because there's a lot of words that I don't view myself as a dummy, but there's definitely some words in there that I had to look up and figure out why. So, for example, the standard. In our common language, we don't think standard as a flag. So understanding the why they use certain words within the ritual. Then you could go into, your Google Scholars, your academia.edu, whatever the case may be. And then finally, I'll also say, you mentioned this earlier in your introduction, you don't know everything. Reach out to your brother, because they may have a resource that you're not aware of. And then based on all that, just tie it in together, find out the common themes, and then hopefully there's enlightenment from there.
Awesome. Go ahead, Sovereign Grand Inspector General Lee.
Yeah. So, really, it's for me, and I just go based off of experience. It's, for one, invest in your own knowledge. With masonry, information is not going to be spoon fed to you. You got to do some work and get into your books, research, talk to well-informed brethren as always, but bring something to the table. Don't just say, hey, well, what is this? And then you have nothing to bring back. Have a conversation, build, come with a question where it looks like you've at least done some research for it, and then kind of grow from there. One of the things that I did as a Scottish Rite Mason and I went to the Southern Jurisdiction Master Craftsman program. And they offer a master, the Supreme Council, Southern Jurisdiction, offers a master craftsman program, and it's a very great program. It really is. It is systematic in how they do it. You get the Scottish Rite Ritual Monitor and Guide, which I get a lot of information from there. I already talked about the Franken manuscript. Bridge to Light. There are several Scottish Rite rituals that are there. Some that are on order that I'm currently getting, because I find as I talk to other brothers, they say, "Hey, do you have this?" It's like, "Nah, man, I ain't got it, but I'm gonna go ahead and get it." So yeah, you just have to get in there and research. And like I said earlier, lawyers practice law, doctors practice medicine, Masons, we practice Masonry. And as long as you're practicing it, you're always going to be learning something new.
Love it. I love it. So what's going to happen now? Once again, I want to thank our two, our two guests, Sovereign Grand Inspector General Stuart Lee, Sublime Prince Dr. Hernando Flowers. Thank you for accepting my invite. One thing you'll know too, the really high level individuals, when you reach out and you ask them to do something out of love, I've never been turned away. I've never been turned down. And that's the beauty of our organization. That also tells us the character of these individuals and these gentlemen who are before you. So again, thank you so much. What I'm going to do right now, so to make sure that I cross my T's, dot my I's before we head out of here, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over really quickly to our director. That way, if he has any final words for us before I close this out, Sovereign Grand Inspector General Dr. Dwayne Thomas, anything for you, sir?
Well, thank you, Sublime Prince Barrett. A big thanks to Sublime Prince Flowers and Sovereign Grand Inspector General Lee for outstanding presentations. You guys you knocked it out the park. And one of the things I wanted to say, because I think it dovetails perfectly into the message today, and I'll just leave you guys with a quote. Most of you are familiar with it. So Nelson Mandela told us that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And I have a corollary to Nelson Mandela's comment. And I've said this many times, education is the tool that we will use to improve our United Supreme Council. And I think all of you that will listen to this podcast can duly attest to the fact that you were educated, that you were provided knowledge. And the more that we do this, the more that we can lay the baseline so that we can improve our United Supreme Council and improve its longevity into perpetuity. So I just wanted to say, fantastic job, outstanding, and we are looking forward to episode 3. So back.
Awesome. So once again, thank you all so much for spending time out here with us. I have to give a special shout out and thanks, because what was going on during this process is, again, Sublime Prince Flowers said, if you have a question, go through something, call somebody. When I was studying the camp, I had a question. I called around. I'm gonna make sure to give them their shout outs. They're gonna be mad at me for doing it, but I'm gonna give them their roses. But Grand Inspector General James Wright and Grand Inspector General Kevin Leapart out of Wolverine Consistory number 6. Those were the two that I called. I was like, hey, what is this? Because I don't know it. I don't understand it. Then they got into the book and they showed me and they taught me. And so as you go through, it doesn't matter what rank or grade, because this Sovereign Grand Commander doesn't care. He doesn't care about that. There's work for everybody to do. If you're in a position to be able to teach or be able to help out an individual, go out to that level and do it, because you'll learn something yourself, but also you'll be able to enhance the Scottish Rite experience. So please, if you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button to this channel so that you can get updates for more that's coming from this United Supreme Council and this podcast, the Moving Camp podcast. But again, enjoy the rest of your day, enhance the Scottish Rite experience, and hope you have a phenomenal